So very good evening to you. 7:05 on this bank holiday Sunday evening here in the UK. And I'd like to welcome everybody to our webinar series here in District 91. Tonight is a really big one. Not to hype Neil up too much, but this is all about contests. This is all about the rules. This is all about making sure that we're running contests correctly. And I'd like to thank Neil for his time this evening. It's a lot of work put in these webinars together, so I do hope you will enjoy the next hour and a half or so with us. Just a couple of housekeeping rules. This is being recorded so that we'll be able to send the recording out to you hopefully tomorrow. Please, if you don't want to be recorded, if you're hiding from law enforcement, that kind of thing, please turn your cameras off. We'd like to see as many faces as we can. There are a lot of faces. There's 96 people on this call, but we'd like to see as many faces as we can, please. It just helps with the interaction. If you have any questions, then please put them in the chat. You can either send them to me as the host, or you can put them in the chat to everybody. I don't mind which you do. And what we'll do is we'll collate these questions at the end and we'll pass them across to Neil. Now, there may be a couple of questions that we can't answer that just need a little bit of verification, in which case we will get back to everybody. We'll send out a mass email at a later stage once we've got the response, but hopefully we'll be able to answer as many of these questions as possible. There will be a short break in the middle. We're just going to find a natural place to have this break rather than just trying to slot one in for the heck of it. So that's going to be 8-ish, but it would depend on how the rest of the webinar goes. And finally, if I could just ask everybody to just keep themselves on mute, please. With 90 odd people on, it can be a little bit discombobulating if we have people speaking over each other. You can open your mics during the break, that's fine. We can have a little bit of networking session, but during the session, please, can you keep your microphones on mute? With that, I'm proud to introduce the District 91 Chief Judge and presenter of tonight's webinar, Neil Coleman.
Thank you very much, Andy, for that lovely introduction, and indeed welcome one and all, and thank you very much for joining us this evening. It's a different approach to a Sunday night, but it's great to see so many faces and nearly up into triple figures as well. So what are we going to be looking at this evening? We're going to be covering organisation of speech contests, but of course this year has been a very different year in terms of speech contests. We've had a very long established rule book that has served us very well, and of course with the events of this year we've now been having to reimagine that and take that into an online space to try and keep all of the ideas and the policies of that still very much working for us and working for our members and our contestants within this new online world. So, of course, many clubs so far will have not had to run a contest during these times. So I'm going to be particularly focusing my thoughts on club level contests. Some areas will have experienced doing online contests, some of the divisions, and of course district. We all got our heads together to think about how this was going to work and how we were going to put these things together. So I want to try and share with you a lot of the ideas that we came up with during that time. It's lovely as well to see some of the team as well from earlier on in the spring who helped get all of these things together, and they've been a wonderful support over the course of this year. So let me start with a bit of a screen share. There we go. Can everyone see that? Give us a nod if we can see that. Good, I'm seeing some nods. That makes me happy. So let's move to the first slide. First of all, why competitions? Well, there are a whole reason why we actually do these competitions in the first place. First of all, it's a good challenge for the competitors. Nothing aids personal growth as being able to actually go up against your peers, try out your skills, and look to see where they can be improved and what you're already building on. Next on up, it's educational for all of our club members as well. to be able for them to see the best of the best, whether it's at club level or whether it's at the International World Convention, for them to get those ideas of skills and tips and tricks to take into their own speeches is actually immensely useful. Then it's also about community. Contest season is one of those few major occasions that we have in the year where we have lots of us all coming together as different clubs, sharing our different club spirits and being able to exchange judges and get involved. It's a great way of bringing everyone together, and it's often the fulcrum of our larger district meetings. And then above all, it's fun. It's one of the biggest things for me is that making sure that all of the contests that we have this year still retain that spirit of enjoyment. And the backbone behind making it fun, I believe, is this: it needs to be fair. I'm going to give a bit of a quote from friends, from Monica Geller: rules help control the fun. And I know I'm dating myself very much there with that quote, but the idea is that in order to have something that's going to be fun, that's going to be useful for everyone, you need to have some baseline rules that are there for everyone to keep. There's nothing more discombobulating than going through a contest and not having decent rules behind you. So let's look at the contest calendar. As a district, we run 4 different contests over the course of a year. And those are broken up, as I see it, into basically 2 seasons. You've got your autumn season. And your autumn season sees the Humorous speech contest and the table topics contest. So these are the contests that you guys will be starting on planning very, very soon if you haven't already. And then roll on the spring, we also add into the mix, we've got the evaluation contest and the international speech contest. So that's the biggie, the international speech contest. So let's go and quickly run through each one of those to give you a little bit of a sense of the flavor. If you're a younger club, you might not have experienced these just yet. So let's talk about each one in passing. Humorous speech. We're looking at a 5 to 7 minute speech. And it has to be a speech. It cannot be a series of one-liners or a monologue. So this isn't about just stringing a bunch of jokes together. This is a distinct speech with a beginning, a middle, and an end. The contents for the speech. Now, this is direct from the rulebook. It is a subject that is chosen by the contestant and should avoid potentially objectionable language, anecdotes, or material. And also, in terms of this contest, all contestants get to be in the room during the point of the contest. So this is one where if you're giving a speech, you get to watch all of the other contestants do their thing as well. Next on up, of course, we've got the table topics contest. Now this one, all of the speeches in the table topics contest are 1 to 2 minutes long. And the idea behind it is that all of the contestants get the exact same table topic. And that table topic is not known in advance to any of the speakers. So this is something that is thought up by the contest chair, and it isn't until the actual meeting itself and during the time on stage that the contestants actually get to hear the table topic itself. So how this actually works is your contestants are all held in a separate room until it is their turn to come in and receive the topic. Now, of course, in the real world, we have actual physical rooms in which we can do this, but in the online world, we get to use breakout rooms. And we'll go into the running of these in more detail during the session. And so then once one contestant has had their turn, it is the next contestant is then brought on in to face the question. So the topic should be reasonable length. So by that we mean that it doesn't run on for 5 minutes or anything like that. It should be a good, concise topic. It should also require no detailed knowledge. So this is very much the same sort of thing that you'd have for a good table topic in any meeting. If it's really specific, it doesn't help anyone compete. And it should also lead to an opinion or a conclusion. So an example of a good topic might be my dream home. So that is, it is of a reasonable length. It doesn't require any detailed knowledge. It is something that anyone can have a go at. Whereas an example of a bad table topic might be, what are your thoughts on the agricultural policies of Eastern Mongolia between 1945 and 1960? So obviously you've got a lot of very, very specific information and knowledge that would be required in order to answer that question. Whilst it might lend itself to an opinion, it would be tricky for people to engage with. And as we've already mentioned, the contest chair selects the topic itself. The other thing about it is that the contestants, once they've done their bit on stage in answering the question, they get to stay on afterwards, so they can actually listen to everyone else give the topic and revel in the things that they might have said. Then we have the International Speech Contest. And again, this is a 5 to 7 minute speech. It is performed in English. That is one of the key components of the International Speech Contest, that all speeches are in English. Within this district, of course, it is an English-speaking district, whereas in France, say, you might have a French-speaking contest in addition to an International Speech Contest. But even the French districts still have to do the International Speech Contest in French. And the subject is chosen by the contestant. All contestants as well can be in the room for this one, so everyone gets to enjoy all of the speeches from all of the contestants. And then finally, we have the evaluation contest. This is 2 to 3 minutes, the speeches that are contained in this contest, and all of the contestants are evaluating a single test speech. And that test speech is 5 to 7 minutes long. And it would typically be either a contest speech or a speech that you would encounter on pathways, that sort of a speech. So the test speech is at the start of the contest. You would want to ensure that the test speaker is not from the same club as any of the contestants, and that you don't announce any speech project objectives. So this isn't being evaluated against any particular rules or personal objectives or anything like that. So all of your contestants, they get to sit there and they take notes on their official note sheet. And then after the test speech, all of the contestants are taken away to a separate room. They get 5 minutes to prepare their notes. And then after the 5 minutes, all of the notes are taken away, and the contestants are taken back to the room one at a time to present their evaluations. And as they do so, the notes are returned to the contestants as they go. The contestants get to stay in the room after they've done their speech as well. As once they've done their speech, that's the last of their speaking within the contest. So those are your 4 types of contests that we run. And we're now going to look at the calendar and how it all starts. So the contests all start at club level. And then we move forward into area level. Area then moves on to division. Division onto district. And the district contest is it's all 4 contests together, and that is held in the spring. But then beyond that, the only contest that goes beyond the district level is the international speech. So that then goes on to region quarterfinals, international semi-finals, and then the World Championship. So the World Championship for this year we've just had in the last week, and that is the only one that proceeds to that upper level of contest. So how do you start? If you're a club and you want to get a set of contests together, well, first of all, you want to assign yourself a contest organizer. And I'd actually suggest not just assigning one contest organizer, but if you can, assign 2. If you've got a large enough membership to allow that. The reason for this is that if you're running 2 contests together, you can actually get 2 people working together really, really well. You can have perhaps a experienced member who will run your who will be organizer for the first contest, but then you could also have a newer member as a contest organizer to run the second one, and the 2 can work together, and one gains from the experience of the other, and they can both get involved in sharing judges or contacting judges. This was something that happened at my club when I first joined Toastmasters. One of my earliest leadership opportunities was as a contest organizer, and I was teamed up with a member who'd been a speaker for many, many years at the club. So together we worked on this, and as a result of this experience with being a contest organizer, it allowed me the confidence to become then the VP for the next year. So contests are a great opportunity to engage your members and get them involved in leadership as well. So we've got our organisers. It's now about setting the date. So your club contest needs to, of course, come before your area contest. And you need to have a bit of conversation with your area director to ensure that you know when that area contest is going to be set for and setting the date of your club contest appropriately. You can't actually rely on saying, well, we always have our club contest at this particular week within the year. You do need to make sure that you speak to your area directors beforehand. I would recommend personally 3 to 4 weeks in between each level of contest if you possibly can, because that allows your contestants a bit of time to be involved with mentoring and working up their speech for the next level. And it also helps the organization between those levels as well. There's more time to be able to reach on out and sort out your functionaries, sort out your judges. So 3 to 4 weeks is what I would aim for. If it needs to be less, then talk to your area director and work on that. Next thing to do is get yourself a copy of the contest rulebook. These change every single year, so it's always incredibly important that you get the latest edition. You need to comply with all of the rules that are here within this rulebook. If you're running a club contest, you make sure that that is the case and that you're not going to be using any old rule books. So in order to pick this up, we've got the URL there at the bottom of the screen, but go to the Toastmasters website and search in there for the 2021 edition. You'll find at the moment that there is what is now the old rulebook is still on there, but also the new rulebook. Reason for the old one still being there is that, of course, the latest cycle is only just finishing. So now we are moving on to the 2021 edition. Make sure that it is being picked up from this location as well, not by a kindly member passing it to you on a club Dropbox or from an old email or one that's been found down the back of the sofa or anything like that, because these things, as I say, they do change. Every single year there are revisions. And you can always check to make sure that you've got the latest edition by checking its revision number. That's there on the first page. So in this case, our latest one is revision 2 for 2020. Then, of course, you have to read it on through to make sure that you understand everything that is in there. And it will cover you for most instances that you're going to be encountering during your club or your area or your division contests. My personal tendency is that I tend to, whenever I'm organizing a contest, is to read it on through on the start day when I'm starting the organization, but then also to make sure that I read it within the week before any given contest, just as a bit of a refresher. Well, you might ask, so, well, why does it change? Well, as things go through each year, there are these little revisions. Sometimes it's little revisions to the wording. It'll be simple things just about making sure that things are clearer. And then sometimes you've got new policies and processes that go in there. In the last few years, for example, we've seen more updating of the rulebook in line with pathways to change it from the old competent communicator style of education to making it relevant to our new educational program. And then sometimes you see some more sizable updates to the rulebook, and I'll take you through one of those now as an example. So this is quite a substantial one that we're getting this year. Speech, subject, and preparation. We have this rule. Contestants must not reference another contestant or a speech presented by another contestant from the platform at the same contest in which they are competing. That's quite a substantial change. What we're effectively is being said by that is that we are now that no contestant can use callbacks. So if you're there in your, say, your humorous speech contest, you can't add in a reference to one of the other speeches that's just gone before you. And you might say, well, surely that's a good thing. Surely that's a useful thing to be able to do as a speaker, to be able to be in your environment and to hear things that are going around you and to personalize a speech to that audience in that time frame. And it's really impressive whenever you see it being done. The only problem is that not everyone gets to be able to do that. If you are the first speaker up, then you've had no speeches before you in order to reference. And if you're the last speaker, then you've had 5, 7 speeches before you that you've been able to sit there and digest, and you can weave some of that into your speech. So by actually ruling that out now, we are saying we are leveling the playing field for all of the contestants so that no one is actually making these references that can appear particularly impressive and sway the judges. The other item that you need to get your hands on as well this year is the online speech contest exception. This can also be found on the Toastmasters rulebook, and it's a couple of additional pages that give some extra steer and some extra guidance for us in how to run online contests as well. So you can find that on the Toastmasters rulebook, on the Toastmasters website. 2 extra pages. The main rulebook is 28 pages. It's worth spending some time reading through those, as they will, as I say, cover you for most circumstances. The other thing to make sure that you do with these rule books is that you don't just keep them to yourself. You've got other key personnel who will need to know the contents of this rule book, namely your contestants, your judges, your chief judge, and your contest chair. And we'll go into that as we go on through. So you've got your contest organizer. What else do you need? Well, let's look at club level contests to start with. Is area and beyond, they're a little bit different, but we'll cover those as we go. First thing you're going to need is your contest chair and your chief judge. So your contest chair, think of them somewhat as your Toastmaster of the day. And they are key to making sure that your contestants are well served and that the contestants are well looked after. They do all the briefings of your contestants, and they ensure fair introductions. What you might find is that if you're the contest organizer, you might want to fulfill that role yourself. Sometimes that works out quite nicely. If you're a contest organizer, you're already familiarizing yourself with the rule book, and that's a way that you can be involved with the contest on the day itself. You don't have to. You can have that as an entirely separate person. That's totally fine. Now, the chief judge, this is the person who is looking after your judges and your functionaries. They deal with all of the briefings of the judges and all of those functionaries, and they are also in charge of protests as well on the day. We'll go into the protests as well as we go on through the webinar. Next on up. One other important thing to note is that these are your lead functionaries. They are the people who will be enacting the rule book during the contest. So they need to be people that you can depend on. They need to be people that are going to make sure that they familiarize themselves with all of this paperwork and the rules and the regulations. Beyond that, of course, we now have Zoom masters as well. You might not necessarily be using Zoom for your contest, but I shall use the term Zoom Master as a catch-all for this particular role. So the Zoom Masters are your technical wizards who are in charge of setting up the platform and making sure all of the settings are what you need to ensure that you have a good contest experience. And we've been incredibly blessed over the course of this year to have some superb expertise from all manner of Zoom Masters who've really helped us out with the district. And some of those people are here on the call this evening. The other thing that I would say with all of these particular roles, when it comes to doing the contest, is to ensure that you have backups for each and every one of them. If you do find that one of these people is not, for whatever reason, going to be available on the day, that you do want to make sure that those bases are covered. So as an example, during the run up to the district contest this year, about T-2 weeks before the contest, I was feeling a little bit poorly, and so we needed to make sure that there was someone in place who knew everything that I knew where we were with the briefings and the entire layout of that contest. And I believe she's here this evening as well. I think Sylvia is on the call. So make sure that all of these roles have a suitable backup person. So you've got these people in place. What else do you need? Well, some contestants would probably help. How many contestants? Well, in order to figure that out, the next thing that you really need to do is sit down and work out an agenda for your meeting. You want to encourage as many people as possible to be involved within your contest. Get them out there to get that experience. It's something I don't think that any contestant actually regrets doing. So plan out your contest agenda. Figure out how many speaking slots you can actually afford, and indeed if you want to do this in one meeting or two, it depends on what sort of demand you're going to be experiencing from within your club. My home club, we split this into 2 separate meetings for each season. So we have in the autumn we have 1 meeting for humorous speech, and we have 1 meeting for table topics. Reason for that is that it's a sizable club. In a speech contest, like the humorous speech contest, we might be looking to fill as many slots as we can, and that might be in the region of 7 or 8 contestants for that. Table topics, I think our club record is somewhere in the high teens for contestants on a table topics contest. So if you can include as many people as you possibly can, that's great for the club, great for building the energy. So beyond the contestants, you've also got voting judges. Voting judges are anonymous individuals, and fortunately in this time of online contests, we've got even more tools at our beck and call to help them be anonymous. What the voting judges do is they actually cast the voting ballots for first, second, and third place. We've gone a little bit too far. At club level, you want to aim for a minimum of 5 judges. Now note that this is a minimum of 5 voting judges, and I would always suggest go for more than that. Reason being that the bigger that your judging pool is, the more you're going to get a fairer result, that you're also going to mitigate against any technical issues that you might have whereby you lose a judge. So then you've got yourself a good pool of judges. Beyond that, as my slide has already given away, you also want a tiebreaker judge. Tiebreaker judges are a separate anonymous judge that ranks all contestants. So they don't just do first, second, third, they do first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, however many that you've got. Be kind to them. If you've got a particularly large club contest, they are going to be ranking an awful lot of individuals, and it will take a bit of brain power to go through all of that. They are immensely important, and they are not an additional extra. Every contest needs to have a tiebreaker judge. Aside from that, contest timers. There are 2 of these for each club contest. They're like a meeting timekeeper, but they are a little bit different in how that role is performed. They don't take any time on stage to introduce the role, for example. They are there to be providing all important timekeeping reports to the chief judge. Ballot counters, 2 of these at club level contests, and these individuals, they are there to work with the chief judge when it comes to actually counting up all of the ballots and attributing all of the marks on a tally sheet later on. So these are the core members of your team, but there are a couple of contests that actually require even more than that. Contest Sergeant at Arms. Contest Sergeant at Arms, these crop up for the evaluation and table topics contests only, and they have a very specific role that I'll come to later on in the proceedings. And then for one contest only, you have a test speaker. This is for the evaluation contest. So in the evaluation contest, as I mentioned earlier, all of the contestants are evaluating one particular speech from a member that's not from their same club. and that is your test speaker. It's also worth, in addition, to have some, what I would effectively call a shadow functionary, someone who you can parachute in to fulfill any role if you need to, in the event that you have people who lose their connections and you find yourself that you are down on a contest timer or down on a ballot counter. Next on up, area level contests. These are, in terms of the number of individuals involved, they are actually much the same, but there are a couple of little caveats. Again, for voting judges, it says you are looking at 5+. The caveat here is that it's 5+, but you are looking to have equal number of voting judges from each club within that area, or a minimum of 5. So again, I would encourage you to make sure that you are going beyond the minimum, to make sure that you are insulating yourself against any technical issues. The other suggestion as well from Toastmasters is avoid doubling up on people fulfilling more than one role as much as possible. It's possible at a club level that you might have someone who, for example, is a ballot counter and also, say, a sergeant at arms, but when you get to area level, the recommendation is to avoid it where practical. That wonderful term practical means do your best, but if you can't, then it's not a breach of rules. Next on up, division level contests. Again, this is slightly different. You've got this time a minimum of 7 voting judges, and you're looking for an equal number of voting judges from each area, or a minimum of 7. And at this level, there is also very much the stipulation that there is no doubling up of roles. Each one needs to be distinct and separate. Also, your judges and your chief judge and your tiebreaker judge cannot be from the same club as any competitor. I think that's a good, sound piece of advice. So those of you who are mathematicians will have noticed that is an awful lot of people to be getting involved in a contest. So my massive recommendation above all is be organized. And this, what you see in front of you, is my secret weapon for contest organization, and that is to have a really, really comprehensive spreadsheet. This particular template I owe to Rupa. Rupa is actually, she created the original template on which I based and built this one. And as you can see, that you've got all of your roles listed down here that you need to fill, and as well as the names, email addresses, and contact phone numbers. And then on this right-hand side, this big grid of what will be yeses and nos allows you to tick on off each stage of your organization. So have you approached this person for a role? Is the role confirmed? Have you checked to make sure that their membership is renewed? Have you added them into the various contact groups? Have you made sure that they've got all of the paperwork you need? Have you received back the paperwork they need? And even it goes into the details of, have they been briefed? Have they arrived at your contest? And in the case of the judges, have they voted? So to be able to have that on hand is really, really useful, and you can share that with your core team. So your contest chair, your chief judge, they will all have access. The other really helpful thing about this as well is that in the case of an emergency, it's very easy to hand that over to your backup individual. So we'll go on through now and we'll look at how you build on out the team, and we'll focus on the individuals involved. Contestants. Where do you get your contestants from? Well, advertise early, advertise often. Make sure that you're advertising within your presidential intros or your club business announcements. Do it via the club newsletter. Get it out there on social media. You don't really want to have a situation whereby your members will say, but I didn't know there was a contest going on. Get the information out there, get people riled and excited about the possibilities. So it's a great opportunity to get your VPPR really going to town. So in terms of contestants, we now need to look at the all-important eligibility. First thing that any contestant needs to be is a paid member in the club, area, division, and district in which he or she is competing. And I need to be very specific on this. When they say a paid member, that doesn't just mean that they have paid their dues to the treasurer. The treasurer must have paid their dues to Toastmasters International. So there can't be any, but I paid it ages ago. It's very much on the onus of the treasurer to ensure that those dues have been paid. Otherwise, if they're not a member, they cannot compete. We don't have, as we used to in years gone by, a grace period anymore. There used to be a system whereby there was X amount of time after your membership whereby you were still entitled to the benefits of membership. That isn't the case. You are now either a member or you are not a member. This is so important to do as well, because if later on down the line you are found that you competed whilst you were not a member, you can still be disqualified. So and these checks do occur, but I know that when we get to a district level, we definitely run through all of these checks. And if I find that actually we have a competitor who wasn't eligible as a paid up member at some point, well, the task of who actually has to tell them that they are now disqualified falls upon the shoulders of the person who should have caught it in the first place. Please, please, please do not let that be you. Do run all of your checks. They are not fun conversations to have whatsoever. Sometimes alcohol has to be involved and some tears are shed. Please do not get yourself in that situation. The other aspect is that the club also must be in good standing. So the club has to have the minimum number of members for it to be a club that is eligible to compete. Another thing that can help if you're running an area or a division contest is on Leadership Central. There is something called the Eligibility Assistant that allows you to check an individual's membership number to see if they are actually an eligible competitor. So make sure that you use that if you are an area or division director. Beyond that, there is one extra set of eligibility rules for the International Speech Contest. For the International Speech Contest, you must have earned certificates of completion in levels 1 and 2 of any path in the Toastmasters Pathway Learning Experience, or in old money, have completed 6 speeches from the Competent Communicator Manual. So this is an additional qualification that each of your competitors has to have completed before the contest date. The contest speech itself cannot count towards this quota. It has to be done beforehand. There is an exception for this rule, and that is only with brand new clubs, whereby charter members of a club that is less than a year old may compete in the International Speech Contest without actually having fulfilled this requirement. That is very much a special case. In eligibility, there are a few individuals who cannot, and there's more details on this in the rulebook, but I'm going to highlight some people who cannot be a contestant. So it's anyone who is serving as a judge beyond club level. So that's a chief judge, that is a voting judge, that is a tiebreaker judge. So the simple, so if you have already agreed that you're going to be a judge at an area contest, then no, you don't get to compete at all. It's a choice of one or the other. You can, of course, have competed, and if you've been knocked out of the contest and you're no longer going to be, then you get to serve as a judge at that point. District officers, sorry, you guys don't get to compete either. You have to take the year out too. So this is anyone from area director upwards. So area directors do not get to compete. There are also anyone campaigning for a district officer role for next year. Also, they don't get to compete either. Anyone serving another role in that contest. I think it should be probably pretty clear to everyone, if you're a judge in the contest, you really, really should not be competing in the contest. But also beyond that, you are looking for anyone who is a contest chair, anyone else who is involved in the contest. They don't get to fulfill multiple roles. Contestant only, nothing else. Anyone presenting at the contest event. So what this might be is if there is someone who's giving a workshop, or giving some sort of an educational session, they don't get to compete either. This could also be, this also includes a contest chair. So even if they are a contest chair for another contest that they're not competing in, they can't do that. You can't have someone who's a contest chair on the day, but is also competing in the other event. That's a no-no. That also includes people who are heads of organising the contest events too. They also not eligible. I would also say that at a club level, under this same notion, if you are the club president for the contest meetings, I would suggest that you, of course, you are welcome to compete, but for that individual meeting, that you set aside your presiding role and give that to another member to do. Reason being that if you are presiding, then you're getting sort of 2, 3, 5 minutes of time at the start of the meeting, whereby you're giving an additional speech, you are showing additional gravitas, and that could, in a way, bias the judges. So I would highly suggest that if you're the president, step aside, focus on being a contestant, and give that opportunity to someone else for the meeting. As a general process as well, I like to tell contestants in contests that if you're at, say, a district contest and you have got workshops going on, sometimes that they will ask for, oh, raise of hands, who will be my volunteer? My suggestion is always don't take up those opportunities. It's, again, you're putting yourself in front of an audience and you're getting extra stage time. Keep it even and fair, leave those opportunities for someone else for contests. Members of more than one club may compete in all of their club contests, but they only get to compete in one area contest. Once you've competed once at area, that's it. You're done. If you don't get to go and pursue multiple areas, it's one area contest only. So that's what you must choose. So once you've got your contestants, first thing to do quickly as you can is send them a copy of that rulebook and the online exception so that they've got all of the information at their fingertips that they could possibly want for being a contestant. Key to that, one of the most important things they need to know early is originality. Within the rulebook, you've got particular clauses on originality. Contestants must create their own speeches and each must be substantially original. 25% or less of the speech may be devoted to quoting, paraphrasing, or referencing other person's content. Any quoted, paraphrase, or reference content must be so identified during the speech presentation. Really important that your contestants know that as early as possible so that when they're doing their preparation that they're writing, that they know that they're not falling foul of that originality clause. So at area level, there are a few other things that you need to keep in mind in terms of who your contestants are going to be. If you are an area and 8 weeks prior to the contest date, you've got 4 clubs or fewer in the area, you get to have 2 highest placed contestants go through from each club. If in the meantime another club charters, they also get to send 2 contestants. This is a policy that we have as a district that in 4 or fewer, you get to send 2. Same is true of division. 8 weeks prior to the division contest date, if you've got 4 areas or fewer in the division, the 2 highest placed contestants go through from each area. And of course, in the case of a division, the 8 weeks doesn't matter because you're not going to gain additional areas during the course of the year because that's always set during realignment. Then judges, finding judges. Well, how do you find yourself some judges? Fortunately, they've got a lot of resources. You want to have a mix of internal and external judges. Reason to get some external judges is that it makes sure that it helps build the community. You're also getting an opportunity to get some extra additional thoughts into your judging mix rather than the potential for your existing members having a halo over particular individual members. So it's always useful to add more in. I tend to like to go for a 50-50 mix whenever I'm involved in doing a club contest. So where do you get your external judges? Well, good old-fashioned networking is a good way. You've got your club officer training as an opportunity to get contact details for individuals. Slack is also a great forum for being able to pick up judges. So that is, of course, our local Slack. And then we've also got the WhatsApp GE Speaker Exchange 2 that can be used. If you're looking for judges, or more so if you are volunteering to be a judge, make sure that you don't put that in the public forum. Do use direct messaging as well to make sure that you make those arrangements. Of course, when it comes to club level, a bit of judge trading is also very, very useful, a bit of mutual back scratching. I can provide you with a judge, can you provide me with a judge? Judges and eligibility. Well, at club level, a judge has to simply be a paid member. At area level, there are more rules involved. They have to be a paid member for 6 months plus, and they have to have earned certificates of completion in levels 1 or 2 of any path in the Toastmasters Pathways Learning Experience, or have completed 6 speeches in Competent Communicator. It's that similar to the rule for competing in international speech contests. At division level, same as the area, but they cannot be a member of the same club as any competitor either. So that makes the sourcing of judges, you need to be very, very mindful of your membership lists and keep that in mind at all times. Everyone else, all of your other contest functionaries, eligibility-wise, they simply have to be a paid member. Next thing that you want to get your hands on are the contest kits. Even though we are now in a digital forum, these are still very much the cornerstone of how we are doing business, how we are doing our contests, and these are all downloadable from the Toastmasters website. Again, I would recommend picking all of these on up as brand new copies. You'd be amazed at some of the things that live on club drop boxes. I've seen ones that have got Toastmasters logos that I think are probably now near a decade out of date. Pick up brand new copies, they are out there. These also have all of the paperwork that you need to distribute to your contestants and to your judges. So you've got your contest eligibility forms, you've got your ballots in there. You will also find as well on the district website, we're helping you out with some additional bits and pieces, so that we're doing a PowerPoint edition of the certificates as well. Next on up is what I call the pre-briefing email. So this is the email that you would send out to all of your contestants and all of your judges to let them know what the next steps are. It might be that you do it as contest organizer, or it might be that this is something that you have your contest organizers and your chief judge do. Make sure you communicate amongst yourselves who's covering what in this context. So the contestants, probably from the contest chair, you want to let them know the contest date, arrival time and location. Speaker profiles and eligibility forms will be attached, and you want to make sure that you get those back well ahead of time. You want to check in to see if there are any disability or sensory impairments that you will need to be keeping in mind during your contest organization. Let them know when the briefing is going to take place and where, and that they need to attend the briefing using the same devices that they're going to use for the contest, that they need to check their lighting and audio visual equipment. And then for the judges, this will typically come from your chief judge. Similarly, contest arrival, time, location. Speaker, well, not speaker profiles, but certainly you are looking for a eligibility form. There we are, the signed eligibility and ethics forms, contest rulebook and the online exception, and a brief overview of their role. Date and time of the briefing, and a copy of their ballot sheet so that they can start to familiarize themselves as well. Functionaries, similarly, you would expect from the chief judge, contest date, arrival time, location, examples of the forms that they would be filling in, and a brief overview of the role. Also briefing date, time, and location. Next on up, as part of the organization of the event, you'd want to have a little bit of a look at some of the technical organization. Now, I'm going to caveat this to say that I am not a tech bod. So the actual very specific which buttons to switch, which settings to turn on, there are people much more qualified than me who will be able to advise on those particular settings. But I'm going to give a little bit of an overview of how we set up of how the Zoom rooms were roughly configured for the contest, as I think that this is something that we would need to know at this stage. So within the district contest, we had a waiting room, effectively, much like the sort of waiting room that you would have been held in before you admitted here. And we had a main contest room and reception where the Zoom masters were patrolling. The idea was that they would introduce individuals one by one to make sure that they could be then diverted off into separate breakout rooms. So contestants went into a contestants breakout rooms, judges went off into the judges room where they were already made sure that they'd been set up correctly so that they were anonymized, tiebreaker into another room, and then the audience we would presumably hold into a separate audience holding room as well. And then once everything is ready to go, everyone is combined back together into the main contest room. The breakout rooms are actually key to the contests within the online space. The judges room gets to double up as the protest room as well if you need to go through a protest procedure too. Also, as part of that, obviously there are a lot of people that the Zoom masters might be moving around during the course of a contest meeting. So what we wound up doing is we had a naming convention for each person coming on in that they were asked to utilize, so it made things nice and slick and easy. So when the Zoom masters are moving people around, that's nice and easy. This is what we came up with. So long as you're consistent, that's great. So I'll leave that there on screen, but this will be made available later on to you in some of the documents that we're preparing as a district for briefings and for contest scripts. Another aspect that we will need within online contests are additional communication means. If in the event that your contest room goes down, you need to be able to have contest lines between all of your various individuals involved. So what we wound up using for district were WhatsApp groups. We had one group where the contest leads were all clustered. So your contest chair, your chief judge, your Zoom master, and indeed your sergeant at arms could be part of that as well. So they are useful for collaborating on wider technical issues and the general flow of a contest. The contestants WhatsApp group is all of your contestants, and they've got in there the access to your contest chair and your chief judge and your Zoom master. So if they run into any technical troubles or if they need to make a protest, they've got that direct link there through that WhatsApp group. Judges kept separately as well. So they're in their own group with the chief judge and the ballot counters. And then the timers as well, they need to be able to collaborate and talk to one another in case they run into any technical issues, and also have access to the chief judge and the Zoom master as well. So as you can see, the Zoom master is popping up a lot here. They're brilliant people for helping coordinate and make sure that everyone that the entire sequence of events is going through, particularly when it comes to any sort of technical issues. So technical issues, they do occur. We have seen them occur as well. So another thing that we made sure that we organized up front within the contest is thinking through, well, what happens if things go wrong? The online exception is actually quite handy in that it outlines a couple of very specific things. First one is in the event of severe technical issues where a contest can no longer continue, i.e. you don't have enough contestants or enough functionaries, the chief judge will reconvene the contest at a later date or time. In practical terms, you want to see if you can make that as quickly as possible. So what we had within the district contest is that we had asked everyone to remain on standby on their WhatsApp groups and be available, that we would try and reconvene things as quickly as possible within say half an hour. Fortunately, we didn't have to go there, but we had that communication channel set up. The other rule that the online exception lays down is in regards to contestants. If there is a single contestant with a technical issue, e.g. the contestant loses connection mid-speech, the chief judge can pause the contest. What would occur at that point is that the timers have to pause their stopwatches. What then happens beyond that is that people reach out, so this will be the contest chair and the chief judge or the Zoom master, to see that they can get the contestant to return to the Zoom meeting as quickly as possible. The contest is on pause. We don't move on to the next speaker. You have to continue within the drawn order. And then when you get your contestant back, the chief judge does a quick check on the contestant's video and mic and asks them to repin their timer once again. And the contestant must resume their speech at the point that the technology failed. So that's something that the chief judge can advise them on when that occurred. At that point, then the timers will unpause their stopwatches at the next communication with the audience. And then the timings continue as usual. So you would still show the red card, sorry, the green, the yellow, the red card. What happens is in this eventuality, there is an additional 30 seconds extra overtime is permitted before a disqualification occurred in the event. This is actually a carryover from the conventional rule book, whereas where there is actually, sorry, I shall come back to that. I shall return to that later. That relates to something else. One thing that we also realized that we can't apply that policy to table topics. Of course, if in the sad and very unfortunate event that your table topics contestant has received the question and then their connection flits on out, then, well, they've received the table topic question. So if they had any additional time, that effectively breaks the game and is unfair on all other contestants. So we didn't apply that to a table topics contest. So as I say, you cannot go changing the speaking order. You have to go with the drawn speaking order, and the speakers do not get to start on over. If you were to permit them to start on over, then you might find that you'd get continuous technical faults until such a point as there was a speech that they were happy with. It's one shot, and you've got that break. You've got that policy in place that they can continue from where they left off if there was a technical issue. So there were a few other technical issues that we thought, well, what happens if this occurs, as it's not specifically mentioned? And one might be if you've got a single contestant with recurring technical issues. For this, we considered, well, the best thing to probably do would be 3 strikes. So if you had, we would restart them once, we would restart them twice, but on a 3rd occasion that we would effectively put them out of their misery. The other thing is that if you're doing multiple restarts, you only get one additional 30 seconds. It can't be 30 seconds plus 30 seconds plus 30 seconds. The other thing that we need to consider is, well, what about single contestants with minor technical issues? So things like occasional audio dropouts, a little bit of compression on the video. What we decided was that Chief Judge would avoid pausing the contests wherever possible. You don't really want to interrupt the contestants' flow if it's still being delivered in a judgeable manner. Other things that might occur, well, what happens if you lose your Chief Judge, your contest chair, your Zoom master, or your timer? The backup person automatically takes over in that event. Loss of a voting judge, well, this is one of those reasons why I suggested that you want to have additional judges. You continue so that you want to ensure that you've got more than the minimum number of judges. If someone falls off or finds that they can't judge a speech anymore because they've not heard enough as they lost their connection, you've still got enough judges to be valid. Loss of a tiebreaker judge, well, in that event, Chief Judge sends a message to one of their other judges and says, "You're it." So they then become that one of the voting judges then becomes the tiebreaker, and they have to run through the process of ranking all of the contestants. Okay, so let's go into briefings now. So as I mentioned, briefings, we're obviously wanting to make sure that everyone's briefed up front. You do need to do briefings. And what we found during the course of doing district was that we staggered the briefings. One of the things that Toastmasters International was recommending was that we can do our briefings early. We don't need to do it just before the meeting. You can now do them up to several days before the contest itself. So what we found to be quite, or at least in hindsight, what I realized is probably the best sequence, start with your functionaries briefings by the chief judge, then have your contestants briefing with your contest chair. You can also have your Zoom masters in attendance for that. Actually, the Zoom master can attend the functionaries briefing too, of course, as it's very helpful. The chief judge, of course, will attend the contestants briefing for any inquiries about how things will run, but also timers. What's really useful here is to make sure that the contestants had the ability to get used to the timing setup that was going to be used, and therefore that's why you wanted to have your functionaries briefing early, so those guys get familiar with how they're running their role, ready for the contestants briefing. Judges briefing beyond that. Reason that comes later is that in the contestant briefing, you would already pick your, you draw your order so that they can be they can know that at the briefing, but also they get to know what your stage area is. That's also defined at the contestants briefing. And then of course, entirely separate, you've got your tiebreakers briefing, as they don't attend a judge's briefing. For more on briefings, what we are currently preparing and should be ready for sharing shortly, well, that's a lot of sounds. We're going to have some documentation for contest briefing and for doing your contest scripts. They're all going to go up on the district website, and these ones are very much online specific. So it will cover everything that you need to cover in the briefings, everything that you need to cover during the course of the meeting itself, and those will be available for you. Okay, one thing as well, when it comes to your, so this is the briefing now for the contestants we're going to look at. One thing that you should let them know about is that the audience will all have to have their cameras and their microphones off during the course of the contest. Reason for that is this is a rule from International that they ask that we do this. Particularly with a larger contest, you can find that there are bandwidth issues and that more people with their videos can wind up crashing the system. There's the potential for people being highlighted away by noise coming from someone else's mics. So the simplest thing to do is just say the only people who have their cameras enabled will be 1, your contestant, 2, your contest chair, and then 3, your timekeeper. So then defining the stage, this is something that you need to run through during the course of your briefing, is agreeing a maximum area amongst all of the contestants. What we wound up using in most instances for the district contest was that it was agreed that we were going to use 2 meters by 3 meters. So that is 2 meters back from the camera, 3 meters side to side. So that was used on virtually all of the contests. The one variation we had for that was the International, where the contestants agreed that they were going to use, I think it was 3 back and then 5 side to side. Either way, it needs to be agreed amongst your contestants. You can recommend that they mark it out on the floor as well for their own guidance. The other thing that the contest chair needs to do is run through audio and video checks with them. So you're looking to make sure that their camera height is suitable, that we're not looking up their nostrils, that they've got room for their gestures on screen, and that they can check, okay, can I go this far over here and still be in shot? How about over here? Checking for audio clarity as well, seeing that their mic is working sufficiently, and also a bit of help on lighting doesn't go amiss as well, just to make sure that they've got a good amount of visibility. To that end as well, it's useful to make sure that you're doing your briefings at the same kind of time of day as the actual contest itself, so that they know that in their scenario you've got X amount of natural light, and then that they might need to supplement it with a lamp here or an extra light here or there. Also run through the technical issues protocols. So the items that I discussed earlier, there are certain things that it's worth them knowing up front rather than them getting in a flap and a panic if everyone is on the same page to start with. Then tips about how to keep their connection stable. We wound up having, oh gosh, there probably were about 10 different points that that we came up with as a group for ways that they could try and ensure that they kept their connection stable. I won't run through them all. They're going to be in those briefing documents, but a few of them might be make sure you update your Zoom to the latest version, and make sure you do it not on contest day itself. Do it early. Going for a cabled setup rather than Wi-Fi if you can. Turn off automatic updates. I think we've all seen people fall into that trap of running into a Windows update just at the wrong moment. Fully charge your batteries if you're using a portable device, that kind of thing. Communications, making sure at that point that everyone is on the WhatsApp group. And then protests as well. Talk through the protest process. So, well, who can protest a speech? The only people who can protest are the contestants or the judges themselves. Protests can't come from any audience members or anything like that. Those are the only people it can originate from. What could it be about? It can be about eligibility, originality, and referencing. Referencing being that new rule that I discussed earlier. Those are the only three things that a protest can be launched under. When can it be protested? As soon as possible after a speech concludes, but definitely before the results. The last thing that you want, well, you can't protest after the results are announced. That's it, that is job done. And ideally you want to get that protest as early as possible so that you can run through that process. So what is that actual process? Well, what happens is the contestant or the judges can announce that they want to make a protest to either the contest chair or the chief judge. The contest chair will then convene will hear what that protest actually is and convene a hearing of the judges. They get to discuss what that protest might be. They then decide whether or not they're going to pursue it by a majority vote. If they wish to pursue it, then the contestant involved gets to come in and present their side of the story. They get to have their say. So the chief judge will say this is what the protest is, and they get to answer that. The contestant is then dismissed, and then the judges take a vote as to whether or not they are going to uphold that protest. But again, majority vote. Their decision is final. That's it. Then you run through the speaking order. What you can use for that is you can use something like random.org/lists. This is quite a handy tool whereby you can copy in the names of all of your contestants. You can do this as a screen share even, which is great, because then everyone can see that due process is done. All the names go in, you hit a button, and they're shuffled into a random order. You need to make sure that you draw the order for all of the contestants as well, not just the people who are at the briefing. If someone isn't there, you still need to make sure that they are put into that order. You can't just say, well, okay, if we have another contestant, we'll just slot them in on the end. Is that way they're effectively choosing their place within the speaking order, which isn't fair. You need that to be done by random. Let's go through with them the speech timings. So speech timings start from first communication with the audience. So that might be a staged act, that might be the first word of a speech, that might be a gesture. So that will be down to the timers to interpret when that speech has started. Demonstrate the timings with the timekeeper. So they get the opportunity to pin, that they can run through the timing codes and make sure that they are happy with those. So they get to practice the pinning as well. And if you have anyone who has visual impairment, they should be offered the opportunity to have audible signals if they wish. So for example, if you have someone who is blind, they might wish to have someone say green, green during the various points when their timings come on through. Contestants may not use extra timing devices. So you can't sit there with your own stopwatch and sit there timing down to the second. This is all part of the challenge of giving a speech. It's making sure that it's landing your speech in time and gauging that yourself. So you shouldn't be sitting there with your own stopwatch. Also let them know what the disqualification times are for their particular types of speeches. There is a minimum and a maximum. You'll find that in virtually all of the contests, the minimum time is 30 seconds less and the maximum time is 30 seconds more. So in international speech, 4 minutes 30, 7 minutes 30. The exception to that is the table topics contest, where the minimum, the green light time is the minimum time. That's your disqualification time. That's 1 minute. Then you let them know about how you're going to introduce the speech. And part of bringing someone into an online speech contest is that you need to have a little bit of a back and forth initially, doing a technical check. So you will, what you'll want to do is say, check with them like, can you see me? Can you hear me? I can hear you. I can see you. Let's begin. So you run through that little dialogue, and that little dialogue does not form part of the speech timings. This is a separate technical check that you do first before the contest chair goes into their speech introduction. So then you'll talk them through what their introduction script will look like. So it'll be our first contestant is so-and-so with a speech entitled so-and-so, with a speech entitled so-and-so. Our contestant is da-da-da-da. There we go. The suggestion is also that they have a brief pause as well before starting on out as well, just as you would in a normal contest, whereby your audience are applauding and settling. Virtual backgrounds as well. This was a question that came up a lot in the springtime. Can you use a virtual background? Well, here's your answer. They're not banned, but we recommend that you do avoid them. Reason being, well, one, they chew through more of your system resources and they can wind up being a bit more of an overhead for your computer to handle. The other thing is that makes them a bit more risky is that sometimes you will see that the edges of a person get lost. So that can affect your gestures. It can affect, it can impair your results when it comes to delivery. So that's why we recommend that they aren't used. Surroundings, another thing to make sure that your contestants do and don't have. Make sure they haven't got certificates on the wall, or that they're not going to be wearing Toastmasters badges or anything like that. It's another thing that can help, that might sway judges with additional gravitas. Just make sure that those aren't on display. And also let them know what's going to happen after the last speech. Are you going to be doing interviews? Are you going to be doing certificates of participation? How does that roll? And then finally, how are you going to be handling the awards ceremony? Are you going to be highlighting those individuals so that they can respond? Are all of the contestants going to be on display during the announcement of the awards? It's nice to let them know so that you know, if you don't get the award that you're looking for, that you know that your camera is going to be on face looking all disappointed or otherwise. Briefings of the timers. For the timers, we have been using the virtual background system really quite successfully, and we developed our own set of timing cards as a district as well. So we had a blank timing card to help the contestants be able to find you, to pin you, and then green, yellow, and red that were nice and clear and with the written words on there as well. What we were asking our timekeepers to do was to cover their cameras with a cloth. That way that their entire screen is dominated by the virtual background. So it's a good dominant area on screen for the contestants to see. So when it comes to timers, you need to have two. You have a primary and you have a backup. And you need to ask the timers to both time all speeches, no matter if they are the primary or the backup. For that, the primary will be the person who is giving the signals and recording the time. We're also asking them to submit the record as well, the timing record, the official timing record to the chief judge at the end. Reason, I'll go into the reasons for that shortly. We have the backup also on standby. The backup has their camera off, and if that primary timekeeper develops a technical fault, then the Zoom master automatically switches to the backup timekeeper and requests that they turn on their camera. The backup then takes over the role in its entirety. So the reason for this is purely to make sure that you are covered in the event of a technical fault with your timer, as it can happen. Now, the reason that we ask that the primary timekeeper do both the signals and the recording of the times for the official ballot is that during a conventional contest whereby we're all together, normally you have your two timers sitting together so they can both see when the timing starts. Of course, in an online contest, you don't get to see that. So we need to have a single true north time, the one that the contestants are seeing, and that's why we're asking the primary timekeeper to do that. Timings, when timings begin, of course, from first verbal or physical communication with the audience. Signals are kept on until moving from one signal to the next. So the green doesn't just flash on, it stays on until you move to the yellow. There is, of course, no bell, no gavel, no sound effects, no visible signal for going over time. The time just keeps on rolling and rolling until the contestant stops. That's it. So what are those timings? Well, here we go. This is something that we'll make sure that you get available later on. It's in the contest rulebook. So table topics 1 minute to 2 with the amber on 1:30, humorous 5:67, evaluation 2:30, 3, and international speech 5:67. Technical issues protocols. You need to make sure that they also know about what happens if the chief judge calls for a contest pause. They need to make sure that they know that they have to pause and they are only resuming when the contestant is reintroduced. And who to send the timing record to. The timing record needs to go to the chief judge and also to the ballot counters. They also need to put down on that timing record when there have been any instances of a timer technical fault as well. So if there is an instance where there is a flip from one timekeeper to the backup, that needs to be marked down. Because in the event of that occurring, there is a 30 seconds grace allowed by the rule book there, that if there is a technical fault. So effectively, say an international speech speaker would then get their maximum extended up to 8 minutes. So also make note of any instance where the contestant had a technical fault, because there is also that protocol that we mentioned earlier, that if a contestant breaks up and disappears entirely, then they get 30 seconds. At the end of the contest, as I say, the timing record goes to the chief judge and the ballot counters. Sergeants at arms, I'll cover them now, as they only crop up in a couple of very specific contests, table topics being one of them. What the Sergeant at Arms does in the table topics contest is they sit with the contestants in a breakout room. So during whilst there's the main contest going on, all of the contestants and the Sergeant at Arms will be together. They need to ensure that the contestants remain in view of the camera with their microphones on. So this is their means of making sure that they aren't, say, looking on their phone and someone's communicating the topic to them, that they are not wandering off, or that they are not, that they don't vanish from view and could be receiving the topic in any other means, shape or form. Of course, Toastmasters are very, very good ethical creatures, but you need to have some sort of scenario built up whereby you can make sure that you've got within reasonable doubt that people are behaving ethically. In the event that there is any question, then the Sergeant at Arms needs to report that to the Chief Judge. Sergeant at Arms also appear in the evaluation contest. Now, they've got a little bit more to do in the case of the evaluation contest. They accompany the contestants to the breakout room after the test speech. They oversee the 5 minutes of note preparation. And for this, they would the contestants are making their notes, and at the end of the timed 5 minutes that they are timing, they tell all of their contestants to put their notes aside. What we were suggesting for the district contests is that you put them behind you at the back of the room, so that everyone knows that they are there and that they know that you are sitting here in front of the camera without access to your notes. The Sergeant at Arms also lets the Zoom master know that the 5 minutes is up, so that they can take the first contestant back into the main contest room. And as I say, again, that during the rest of the contest, they need to make sure that the contestant stays with their camera and microphone on, and that they aren't using any electronic devices, so there can't be any possibility that they're sitting there watching the contest unfold and seeing what the other contestants say. Again, making sure that you report any issues to the Chief Judge. Voting judges. Again, we're going to have a set of briefing notes for the voting judges. They're going to go up on the website. First of all, the main thing to let them know about is very much underline that the purpose of judging has not changed, even though we've gone online. It's picking a distinct first, second, and third, no ties. Using the ballot sheet. Now, there is within the online exception, it does stipulate that we are not using any external voting systems. We don't have the specifics of why that is, but I would surmise that this is probably to do with ensuring that we're not submitting votes into a sort of black box that's relying on someone to have set it up in the correct manner for ensuring that all the votes have been properly tallied and counted. And also that by having a conventional ballot system, you've got multiple people overseeing the ballots at all times. So you've got your chief judge and you've got your ballot counters who are all there to verify that those ballots are being handled correctly. So what they can do is they can print out the ballot if they wish, or they can use the electronic versions and just fill them in electronically. Here's an example of your typical ballot sheet, and as you can see, this is one that's electronically fillable, which is why we've got all these purple shaded areas. Let your judges know that they need to read the criteria. Some things never change. Contestants' names go across the top. They get 1 minute of silence after each speech. And then this is where things get a little bit different. After the final speech, the Zoom master will move all of the judges into a breakout room. So then they've got unlimited amount of silence whereby they can carry on doing their tallying, and the contest chair can go about its business with the rest of the proceedings and entertaining the crowd. As I say, as long as they need to complete. And the key thing that they need to do is make sure that they fill in first, second, and third at the section at the bottom, sign and print. So you can electronically sign and make sure that the name is printed as well. Then what they can do, if they're using a physical copy, photograph or do a photograph of the physical copy, or an electronic copy, you can do a screen grab just of this bottom section. No one wants to know about what happens in the top section and how all those marks are tallied up there. This is strictly about that bottom section, the official ballot. Then what we asked them to do was to email those to the judges and to the ballot counters. So by doing so, by emailing them, you've got 3 different individuals who've all got all of those ballots together. So it's never passing through any one individual's hand. Everyone knows that these are the votes as they have been cast. And then once everything has been received, the judges can be removed from the breakout room and returned to the contest room. The other thing is you can let them know the speaking order, as that's already been determined at the contestant briefing. Let them know what the stage is. One thing to note about the stage and to let them know about is that it's not a disqualifiable offence to go outside of the speaking area, but it might affect marks for delivery. Then we go through another one of the things that we can do for the online contests, and that's the process of anonymizing. In fact, you can actually have a lot more anonymity online than you could in the real world. What we ask them to do is arrive with their cameras off, microphones off, profile pictures disabled, and change their name to J, and then what we do is we assign each judge a particular number. So you'll have J1, J2, J3, J4, and then the chief judge keeps track of all of those. So they keep those written down so that they can see if they lose a judge that, during the course of the contest, and to see, okay, J12, that's Ralph Smedley, we've lost Ralph, all the other people are still around and we'll still be getting ballots from. When they arrive at the meeting itself, the Zoom master will admit them one at a time. So the Zoom master can do a quick check to make sure that the profiles are off, that the microphones are off, and push them into the appropriate judge's room. Let them know about what happens in the event of technical issues, what those policies are, and in particular, that if they as a judge find that they've run into a technical issue that means that they've not been able to see a speech in full, let the chief judge know, and the chief judge might ask them therefore to stand down as a judge because they're no longer able to judge all of those contestants fairly. don't just assume that you're off the hook for judging, because if everyone has gone down, then everyone's got the same problem, and it's a reason to pause the contest and sort that contestant out. Protest procedure as well. You need to outline the protest procedure we already covered with the contestants and how that will run. Then we go into the conventional, we go into markings and fairness. And there are a few points we need to cover specifically for online. Looking at the
question, Neil.
We'll cover the questions at the end. If you pop it in the chat, Andy will cover. Thank you very much. Looking at the camera is considered eye contact. That's our equivalent in this online space. Marks for audience reaction. You're often asked to supply. Use your own reaction. It is an audience of one in those instances. We are not there to judge on audio and video quality. This isn't a contest for who can afford the snazziest webcam or anything like that. This is, you're still gauging the quality of the speech itself. Ignore timings, the classic rule. You don't need to pay any attention to those. Timekeepers and chief judge, they look into that and sort that out. And then do not consider a lot of the usual things that you would expect: age, gender, race, creed, nationality, regional accents, professional beliefs, past performance or reputation, future performance of how you think it might do at a next level. It is all very much about how the speech is done there and then on the day. After the contest, destroy all paperwork and votes, and that applies as much as ever for electronic copies as well. So delete them out of your mailbox, destroy the ballot sheets and all of that kind of thing. And if you're the contest organizer, ultimately it's going to be your responsibility to make sure that you blank all of your spreadsheets as well. Those shouldn't be discovered by a future area director who can then see who voted what and all of these things. Those all need to be destroyed. Judges should not discuss notes or the results, decline any requests for feedback, make no comment or criticism of the contest, and then of course make sure that you change your name back on Zoom from J1, J2 to your real name. As if you crop up at your next club meeting with J something, it kind of gives the game away a little bit. Tiebreaker judge. Briefing of the tiebreaker judge, very much the same, same kind of briefing. There's an exception though. They don't get to be involved in the protest proceedings. They're always external to that, and they get a different ballot slip. Their ballot slip has an awful lot more spaces on it for all of the votes. They have to rank all contestants rather than first, second, and third. And then when it comes to emailing the ballot, they email it to the chief judge only. And when it's called upon, if it's called upon later in the process, we'll come to. But that's very much in line with the conventional contest. The tiebreaker judging ballot only goes to the chief judge. Briefing of the ballot counters. How this runs, what we did with the district is the chief judge does a screen share, and we simply had a tally sheet on screen. And what we asked our ballot counters to do is, well, let's go through the tally sheet first. Contestant names across the top, judge's name along the sides, very much like a conventional ballot sheet, tally sheet. And then what the ballot counters do is they look at each ballot, check that it's valid, i.e. signed, printed, and that it's got a distinct first, second, and third, no ties in there. And they call out the votes from each individual judge. So each ballot counter gets to hear, check, validate it, and they can also verify that the chief judge is inputting it into the tally sheet correctly with no input errors. So 3 points are put in for a first place, 2 for a second, 1 point for a third. The next thing that the ballot counters were also asked to do is to verify that the chief judge makes no errors in input of the final rankings. So the chief judge will fill in all of the awards on screen. Actually, we'll come back to that. I've jumped ahead a little bit. The chief judge also, if we need to, break a tie. If we find that we've got the same number of points for one or more contestants, then they share on screen the tiebreaker's ballot. So they then go through and see, well, what did the tiebreaker say, who ranked which contestant where, and they use that to break the tie. We also then look at the timers sheets as well to look for any disqualifications, and those individuals are removed from the final rankings. Then, of course, then what they do is they observe the filling in of the final certificates, so that they make sure that the correct results are being put in first, second, and third, and also that there is also a sheet where all of the contestant rankings are recorded, and that should also be done correctly too. So that's it. That's the briefings over. It's worth doing those early because, as you can see, there is a lot more detail in online briefings. There are quite a few more things that we need to cover in the online space. So with that done, we get to contest day itself. And the main thing to cover is the on arrival. You've got your Zoom master. They're going to be moving all of the people into their various rooms to run through final checks. So it's just checking that all the tech is working for each individual, that everyone is happy, that they know what they're doing. And then we move in to the contest introduction main by the contest chair. And for that, there's a degree of flexibility in that you can have some fun with it, of course, but there are a lot of key points that you need to cover off in your introduction to make sure that everyone knows what is going on, that all of the rules have been discussed with the contestants. So what we've generated for the district, and is going to be up on the website very soon, is a script. So that script outlines all of those key points that you need to cover within your introduction as a contest chair. The other thing that it outlines are the contestant introductions. The contestant introductions really do have to follow a distinctive same script. The reason for that is you don't want to go biasing any of your judges by introducing someone in a more positive way or a more negative way that could influence the marking. So it's got to follow that script. And it can usually follow these sorts of lines. Our first, second, third, etc. speaker is, and you give their name, with the speech entitled. You give the speech title, then you repeat that with a speech entitled, and then you end on their name. And then they know that that is their moment to start. We do not make any comments about the speaker as you introduce them. You don't say, oh, please welcome our most esteemed Toastmaster. Please welcome our immediate past president. Nothing like that before, as that will bias potentially. And you do not make any comments about the speech or the speaker when it concludes either. There is no thank you for such an incredibly motivational speech that you might see in a normal Toastmaster meeting. Sometimes that might mean that you are having to fight back some tears, but you need to do it. You need to make sure that you are giving as level a playing field as you possibly can when it comes to those introductions. You simply call for the 1 minute silence for the judges to complete their marking. So then, once you've done all of your speeches, what next? All of your judges have been dismissed into the other room to finish off their ballots and their voting. So there are things that you can do. First of all, you can thank your contestants. You might want to interview the contestants. You might want to give out the award certificate of participation. You should definitely do that. If you've got more time to play with, maybe you go into club notices, you might go into welcoming the guests, but of course you want your judges to stay anonymous throughout that process, so it will just be the rest of your guests. Or as a good backup, make sure you've got a table topics master on standby. If your judges have wound up going into a protest situation, it might take longer than you count for. Don't rely necessarily, you need to have some flexibility in your agenda at this point, because that can take a bit of time. Table topics can get you out of an awful lot of situations. Then we reach the awards themselves, and those can be done by either the contest chair or the chief judge. Typically in our district, we tend to do it by the chief judge. They would often take the stage, give their thank yous, and then go into timing disqualifications. They announce if there are timing disqualifications, but they do not name the contestant involved. They simply say, well, there have been timing disqualifications. They might wish to ask the audience to unmute themselves. It might be at this point in the proceedings that you get a bit more audience interaction, that they get an opportunity to be involved and to applaud and to show their appreciation. And then you step through announcing third, second, first, at that point, maybe your contest chair will do like a little mini interview with your first place contestant. It's up to you how you handle that. Some people they flash a picture of a nice award on screen as well as a means of really bigging up and giving a bit more gravitas to that win. And then the final duty is to announce the next level date for the competition, so that everyone knows when they're going to be focused on that next contest. Hooray, hooray, mission accomplished. However, of course, in good old Steve Jobs fashion, there is one more thing, and that is handing over. And for that, you have to make sure that your next level receive the notification of contest winner. This is done by the chief judge, and the contest organizer needs to make sure that it occurs as well. And this is where the chief judge ensures that they send through the paperwork with all of the qualifying contestants listed. So it's not just first, second, or third. That is everyone who was not disqualified needs to be on there. Reason for that is that if you find that your first place contestant isn't able to make the next level, then it goes on to the next person down the line, and so on and so on. It might be that you find it as someone quite far down the line beyond first, second, or third, who is actually the person who goes on to represent at the next level. The final thing that one needs to do is, of course, delete everything. You delete all of the contest paperwork so that there isn't anything left about how that contest, how those contest votes went. Those all need to go away, and you move on to the next level of the contest. There are going to be a huge amount of additional resources put up at this link over the coming, probably the next couple of weeks. So do keep an eye out for that, and they're all going to be online specific. You're going to be seeing things like you'll have the timers cards there, you'll have access to the scripts, you'll have access to the briefing notes. They're going to be made available for you. And if there's anything else that you need that you've seen this evening, do shout, and we'll see that we can get those added too. And on that note, I shall turn to Andy to see if we have some questions, and I'm no doubt that we have.
Neil, thank you very much indeed. What a fantastic presentation there. Can we have a round of applause, please, for Neil? I think that was a fantastic job. Okay, we have got quite a few questions and clarifications, so we'll quickly rattle through these. So Amy, so just to clarify, it's still just a strong recommendation on club contestants not having the target speaker from the club, but not a requirement. Can you just clarify that?
I'm pretty sure it actually is a requirement. Yeah, do make sure that you get them from outside. Even at club level, it shouldn't be someone who's known. It shouldn't be known to your competitor.
Great, thank you. Toby said, so if another contestant says, correct, like John said, a funny thing happened to me as well, then that's an instant disqualification.
It's not an instant disqualification. It goes to protest. It's something that either the contestants or the judges can lodge as a protest, and then it would go into a protest hearing, and then it's down to the judges as to whether or not they're going to uphold that protest. But good question, though. Thank you. I should have made that known that is a protestable.
But try and stay clear of it.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Do reiterate this because this is quite the rule change.
Yeah. Jeanette, can a tiebreaker judge be part of the voting group of 5?
No, they cannot. They are separate and in addition to the voting group of 5.
Okey dokey. Sylvia asked for the editable PDFs. We will get that sorted for you.
Absolutely.
So thank you for that. Mary Robertson, what happens if a contestant does refer to another speaker? We've covered that one. This creates a bit of debate actually in the chat window. Why the minimum of the 7 judges? Is this a statistically significant number, or was it arbitrarily chosen?
I actually don't know what the ruling for that is. Sometimes that we do get to see when there's a new rule introduced, there's sometimes an accompanying PDF that explains where those ideas came from. this is a rule that goes back quite a long time, so it's not one that I can talk to its heritage and legacy. But I'm glad that people are discussing and suggesting that there's a folklore potentially developing around this one.
Fantastic. Gavin asked, when will the briefing scripts be available? They've got a briefing scheduled for next Thursday.
Next Thursday. Well, they are undergoing their final review now. If you are mad, desperate pressed, drop me an email and I can fast track that to make sure that you get them in your inbox rather than on the website. Just let me know. But they are going up online as well as access to all.
Fantastic. Mary Robson again, can a Zoom master turn cameras on and off?
Technical stuff, there are some far more able individuals than me to talk about these things. I think a Zoom master can possibly request a camera to be turned on, but I don't believe they have the facility to actually open your webcam for you. That could be a little bit scary potentially. But in terms of that, yeah, there are some very technically minded people who can give you the ins and outs of what buttons to toggle on and off in your Zoom settings.
Fantastic. Okay. Amanda, can Chief Judge be tie-break judge if the tie-break judge drops out?
I would. They shouldn't be. Those should be distinct and separate roles. The protocol I would suggest is that have more voting judges that you need, and if you do need a tiebreaker in that instance, you talk to one of your voting judges and redesignate them as the tiebreaker.
Okay. Mike, I thought this was quite an interesting question. Is ranking and tie-breaking done before timing disqualification check or afterwards?
Is ranking and tie-breaking... in many ways, I don't think there's actually a difference. Is that you'll get the same result. I would tend... I think when I've gone through, it's a good question, and there probably actually is something within the process document that actually gives an official answer. My tendency would be to go through and rank and then do the disqualification. I'm just trying to think if it would actually create. You definitely want to make sure that you are doing all of your ballot, all of your noting of your marks. You shouldn't actually, okay, we're not going to count someone's marks because we already know that they're disqualified on time. You always want to make sure that the time disqualification occurs after that. So I would do your ranking and then your time disqualification.
Okay, thank you. From Alice, do we need to delete eligibility certificates as well?
I would, eligibility paperwork, I would hold. That's a good question. Let me come back to you on that one. I don't know the answer, so I will check that one up. My gut instinct, you retain it, but I would want to be doubly sure.
Okay, Alice, we'll get back to you on that one. From Marcus and Aylesbury, if we do table topics and humorous speaking on the same night, do the awards happen after both contests or after each individual contest?
You can do them at the end. That's perfectly fine. Yeah, a lot of contests that I see, they do it as one great big award ceremony at the end. That's perfectly fine.
Okay, just scrolling back through. I think a lot of ones have been covered.
Andy, can I just jump in? The question
Absolutely,
which has come up. Thank you. A question that came up, Neil, is about whether or not you can compete in more than one district.
Not that I'm aware of, no. No, I'm pretty sure that isn't possible. I will do a double check on that one though as well.
I think because some people have now joined us from other districts.
Yeah.
But the rule that I would just flag is the fact that there is a rule that says no contestant can compete in more than one area speech contest in any given 2 areas or even districts or divisions. So that would probably disqualify them from being in 2 district contests at any time.
Yeah, as effectively you are then representing at more than one area in order to go through. Yeah, that would make sense.
It depends which contest you're involved in.
The rules state that, no, John, the rules quite clear there.
Are you sure they apply to all and not apply to just the international? Because some of the rules only apply to the international.
No, this is an area contest. You can only be in one area contest.
It's in the general rules section, I think, rather than specifically in the international section. So they've divided it up.
I'll pop the rule in the chat.
Okay. I think we've got most of the questions that have come up in the chat. We've got a couple of minutes left, so if there's anybody who would like to actually ask the question verbally, then Vinette's just asked if the primary timer has a technical difficulty. What if the primary timer has technical difficulty? We did actually cover that one earlier, Vinette. So
there is actually, there's something quite handy that you can do there, that the Zoom Master has the ability to highlight someone. So in the event that you lose your primary, the Zoom Master can actually flash up on screen the primary for a second, so that the contestant can actually see there has been a switch. But the other thing is that if you are, because you've only got 3 people who are effectively visible, the contestant, the timer, and the contest chair, you're only looking at 3 screens anyway. So you should be able to spot that your timekeeper is there on screen.
Cool. Any other questions?
If I could ask one, Neil, there are quite a few extra technical issues and rules given to the International Speech Contest. At the last district contest, we applied those rules to all the contests. Are we going to do that again this year? Regarding webcams and multiple webcams and zooming webcams and all that issue.
Yeah. I mean, we followed that process because the rulebook is stipulating that in terms of webcams that you've only got 3 people. Well, all of the audiences having the webcams off. I've not had any other further guidance from TMI to say that we're making any changes on that.
Thanks.
Cheers, John.
Yeah, can I ask a question, please?
Yes, of course, Brian.
Brian, this rule about you saying that you can only have the contestant on camera, and who else?
It's basically it's audience off, so it's the contestant would have their camera on. You would have your timekeeper with the camera on, because you need them for the virtual background, and then you can have your contest chair as well.
Right. And question I'm going to ask there is, surely if the person giving the speech, he can't see no one, or he, she, they're just basically all they're going to see themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It is very low on feedback, that's for sure. It is quite a different arena.
Yeah, well, for me, I personally think it's really weird, but if that's the rules. Is that for club and area contest?
Yeah, it's all online contests. Yeah.
Right.
I think the one contest that's really going to affect the humorous speaking, where people thrive on the feedback and the laughter, and obviously you're not going to get that, so that is going to make life a little bit different this year, and hopefully people will be able to accommodate that, and it will be interesting to see how people react to that.
Yeah.
Can I throw another one in, please?
Absolutely.
If a contestant comes along and says, in order to mitigate the risk of my dropping out, can I log on twice, once on my computer, once on my mobile? Is there a view which says yes, no, or good question?
No, they can only be logged onto one device. It's worth having a backup. Certainly that's something that we have in the contest chair briefing notes that Anya Sims has put together for us. She was our contest chair for the spring for international speech. Yeah, have one on standby as a backup, but you should only have one logged in, particularly when it comes to the likes of evaluation and
yeah, that's what I was wondering. So,
yeah.
Thank you.
Neil, Jeanette here. You mentioned the dimensions of the stage for contestants. is that a requirement, or could they just, for example, sit in front of their computer as we're all doing now? Is it expected that they're standing and presenting?
They don't necessarily have to stand, but you do need to define a maximum stage area. And it might be that you have contestants who decide that I'm going to sit and I'm going to be 1 meter away, but it's just so that you've got a maximum down. It's particularly important when it comes to the international speech contest, because when you reach a district level, they have to be recorded, and as part of the submission, the video has to state what that maximum area is for consideration at the next level.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Arabella asked a question which we have already answered, but we'll quite happily go back over it. You can't be a contest chair for one contest and then swap over and compete as a contestant in the next contest. That's a no-no.
No, not in the same event, because you've then got someone who's getting more prestige, more gravitas, more stage time effectively, and you've got the point of that you can sway the judges. There is a sort of related or equivalent question of, can you be a judge in one contest and compete in the other? In terms of the rules and regulations, there isn't anything that specifically stops that. However, it's a really bad idea, because fundamentally you're going to have a contestant potentially being briefed alongside other judges, which you don't want at all. That's as in my mind, that is an absolute no-no. So just don't go there.
Okay. Nikita has said, if a contestant has won at more than one club, they have technical difficulties that cannot be resolved at the area they choose. Can they go to another area to compete?
They may not. Once they've made their choice of which area that they are competing in, they've competed. So if they had that technical area, the technical issue, then that was how it ran on the day. And
so even if they've not actually spoken, just because they've kind of gone, I'm going to that area competition, that's then not in them.
If it's reached the point where they haven't spoken. Good question. I'll have to come back to you on that one. Yeah, that's a good poser. I like that.
Okay, thanks, Nikita. I'm just conscious it's 9:05. If we've got one, maybe two more quick questions, otherwise we will start to wrap it up. As I've said a couple of times, just for those of you who may have missed it, this has been recorded. There has been an awful lot of information. Probably for most people, kind of information overload, but I think it was really important to get all this information out. The recording will be available tomorrow. I'll send the link out. I'll send the link out to any materials that we've got ready. Otherwise, we'll send the link out when we've got the other bits and pieces ready. So don't worry if you missed bits. It's perfectly all right. Bonnie, I see a hand up there.
Yeah, I was just commenting on the last question. Neil, what do you think if the person has not been announced? Because if they're going to be announced as a contestant, then that might say you're not allowed to participate in the second area contest.
Yeah, if you've been announced, then yeah, that would be very much a situation where they are considered representing. If you've got, I'm mentally wondering about situations whereby you've got a technical issue on the day, as in just before the contest, that I want to spend a little bit of time mulling on to figure out what happens in that instance. But yes, once announced, you are that contestant for that area. You're in.
Right. But if they're not ever able to connect to that first area contest,
that's where it gets more interesting, and I'll put some brain power behind it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Our final question this evening is Martin at St Paul's. Martin.
Just a quick clarification. When we've got people in the breakout room, say for the evaluations, and they're all in the breakout room, what happens if one of them then has a technical issue there? So say you miss your one in the order of the evaluators because you're having problems getting back into the breakout room?
Well, in the you above all you need to keep your order of the evaluation contest. So you still want to get that person on there and get them into that main room. So reach out, get in touch with them to get them online and to proceed if there has been a technical fault in that instance. Yeah. Does that answer the question, Martin, or have I?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, cool. One other thing actually in regards to evaluation contests that I forgot to mention is that when your contestants arrive, of course in the real world contest, these days everyone is given a sheet of paper which is their official piece of paper that they're allowed to use. Now we're not necessarily going to be able to distribute those for a contest. If you can, excellent, great. However, the nearest alternative as far as I'm concerned is that they show as they join that they're using blank paper, that they present that to the camera. The reason behind this is that you can't have a contestant turning up with an elaborate evaluation form that has this, that, check for this, that's a no-go. Once the contest has started, they can draw whatever they wish. They can put smiley faces on if that helps, but you want to just make sure that they've all got the same starting point at least for that contest.
Wonderful. Neil, thank you very much for your time this evening. It's really appreciated. It's been a fantastic 2 hours worth of work, and I'm sure everybody's, the chat window is full of people saying thank you very much, and a really great evening. So we will send this out over the next couple of days, and please, if you've got any questions, then contact me in the first instance rather than to Neil, and I can help filter out some of the questions and make sure that we don't duplicate loads of stuff. So thank you very much to everybody. Have a fantastic evening. For Bonnie, who's in the States, have a fantastic afternoon. And I look forward to seeing everybody next week for Florian's leadership lessons learned. So from all of us here on the webinar team, thank you very much and have a great night. Thank you.